Fire Chief Natalie Ruiz found a bobcat standing guard inside the collapsing house, its eyes fierce with desperation. She pushed through the choking smoke, never suspecting the unimaginable truth she would uncover within those charred walls. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. In the quiet suburbs of Mesa, Arizona, the summer heat often shimmered off rooftops and baked the pavement until it felt like a sizzling skillet. But tonight, the glow in the sky came from flames, not just the usual desert sun. A sudden electrical short in an older home had sparked a fire that now threatened to consume the entire property. Residents flocked to the sidewalk, some still in pajamas, as smoke billowed into the night air. Amid the wail of sirens and the rush of hoses, a lone figure crouched near the window. A bobcat. Its tawny fur stood out against the flicker of red and orange, and it refused to budge. Fire Chief Natalie Ruiz had seen plenty of chaos in her 15 years of service, but never had she come face to face with a wild cat on a blazing property. Ordinarily, bobcats avoided human contact, especially in a noisy crowd. This one, however, stood its ground as if guarding something precious. Through the swirling smoke, Natalie could see the reflection of fear in the animal's eyes. The firefighters shouted for everyone to stay clear. Nobody doubted the danger of a disoriented predator trapped by fire, yet something about this bobcat's posture suggested it had a purpose, an unwavering resolve that defied common sense. As black smoke poured from the roof, an elderly neighbor frantically explained that the house belonged to Juan and Rosa Hernandez, longtime community members known for rescuing stray animals. He recalled how Rosa once nursed a sick coyote pup back to health and how Juan had a habit of feeding desert critters on his back porch. But there was no sign of the couple now. Rumor had it they were out of town for a family reunion. So why was there a bobcat inside? That question gripped Natalie as she motioned for her crew to hose down the front door, hoping to push back the flames. As soon as the water hit the doorway, the bobcat let out a raspy hiss, tail twitching in alarm. Instead of fleeing the suffocating heat, it darted back through a broken window, vanishing into the house. Natalie felt a surge of alarm. No wild animal would run deeper into a blaze without cause. She shouted to her team, instructing them to approach cautiously. Firefighters Mark Sullivan and Jana Park took the lead. They knew the structure could collapse at any moment, but they also knew that an open flame in this tinderbox neighborhood could spread rapidly, if not contained. Inside, the air felt thick enough to choke on. Flames crackled overhead, and walls creaked under the stress of intense heat. Jana tested the floor with each step, worried about hidden weaknesses. Mark swung his flashlight in wide arcs through the smoky gloom. Visibility was near zero, but a flash of movement darted across their path, a bobcat tail disappearing around a corner. Radios crackled with updates from outside, voices urging them to evacuate, but Mark and Jana pressed on. Something about the bobcat's determination gnawed at them. Why risk certain death in a burning house? They could only guess. They advanced into a hallway where family photos blistered and peeled from the walls. In the flickering light, Jana noticed a series of scratch marks near the baseboards, evidence that animals had roamed freely here. The temperature climbed, and each breath felt like inhaling embers. A door to the right led into a small living room, its furniture smoldering under a veil of ash. That's when they heard it. A faint, frantic sound coming from behind an overturned bookshelf. Mark signaled for Jana to help. Carefully, they pushed aside the debris and discovered a cardboard box with claw marks around the edges. Inside lay 3 tiny bobcat kittens, eyes not yet fully open, mewling weakly amid the acrid smoke. Their fur was singed at the tips, but they were miraculously alive. Jana inhaled sharply, realization dawning on her. The adult bobcat they'd seen wasn't just any intruder. It was a mother, desperately trying to protect her litter. Mark quickly radioed for a rescue carrier, but the firefighters outside were already warning them to evacuate. The flames had spread to the roof, threatening a total collapse. Natalie's voice crackled through the radio, urging them to get out now. Mark locked eyes with Jana and nodded. Gently lifting the box, Mark cradled the kittens against his chest, while Jana led the way back toward the hallway. Smoke stung their eyes, and each breath felt like fire in their lungs. The structure groaned ominously, timbers straining under the onslaught. Just as they reached the front door, the ceiling in the living room collapsed with a deafening crash, sending sparks and embers rocketing through the air. Outside, the crowd gasped in collective horror. The mother bobcat suddenly appeared on the windowsill again, her wild eyes fixed on Mark and Jana. She let out an anguished yowl that cut through the din. They bolted outside, gasping as cooler air hit their faces. The kittens squirmed in the box, still crying for their mother. Almost at once, the mother bobcat sprang from the window and landed on the porch, ignoring the frantic shouts of onlookers. Natalie signaled her crew to hold back the hoses, worried the water spray might startle the animal into a dangerous reaction. Nobody wanted a panicked bobcat running through the gathering crowd. But to everyone's astonishment, the mother approached Mark, never breaking eye contact. Her body trembled. Whether from fear or sheer adrenaline, it was impossible to say. Mark gently set the box down. The bobcat sniffed the edges and peered inside, releasing a low rumble of relief. For one heartbeat, man and beast locked eyes in the fire's glow. Then the mother seized a kitten by the scruff and leapt off the porch. Firefighters parted, hearts pounding in genuine awe. Natalie signaled Jana to follow at a distance, ensuring the others stayed safe. None realized this act was just the start of a life-changing discovery. Less than 100 yards from the smoldering house, Jana maintained a watchful distance as the mother bobcat ran in a panicked zigzag. Between the adrenaline still surging in her veins and the acrid scent of smoke embedded in her clothes, Jana felt her heart pounding with every step. She followed, though not too closely. No one wanted to corner a mother protecting her young. Still, Jana couldn't ignore the twinge of concern. The bobcat was obviously rattled, sprinting into a neighborhood filled with children, pets, and unsuspecting families watching from their front yards. Behind Jana, Fire Chief Natalie Ruiz radioed instructions to keep the perimeter clear. The last thing they needed was chaos spilling into the streets after the tense scene on the porch. Mark was back at the fire truck with the remaining 2 kittens, each mewing loudly in a small carrier. Paramedics on scene didn't often deal with wild animals, but they knew the urgency of checking the tiny creatures for burns or smoke inhalation. The mother bobcat, meanwhile, clutched the one kitten she'd managed to rescue herself. Jana could see the kitten's little paws dangling in midair, a pathetic but determined grip on life. At first, Jana assumed the bobcat would vanish into the desert scrub beyond the neighborhood. Instead, the cat darted around a tall mesquite tree and leapt over a chain-link fence surrounding the Hernandez family's backyard. The property was large by suburban standards, with a vegetable garden, a sun-bleached picnic table, and a row of prickly pear cacti along the back wall. From the street, it looked ordinary. Once Jana reached the fence and peered over, though, she saw something that made her pause. An entire corner of the yard had been converted into a makeshift animal enclosure. At a glance, she spotted wire pens, insulated doghouses, and wooden shelters covered with tarps. Ranged along the fence were bowls of water and feed, labeled with names like Cody, Bella, and Tinker. She realized that Rosa and Juan must have been doing more than casually feeding strays. They had set up a small sanctuary. A battered sign propped against a post read, "Let them rest, let them heal," hinting that the couple's kindness ran much deeper than neighbors had ever known. The mother bobcat, still holding her kitten, slinked under a gap in the wire mesh, disappearing into a shadowy nook. Jana hurried back to the front of the house where Mark was crouched beside the fire truck. "We need to get these kittens to a safe place," he said, his voice hushed. He stood as Jana approached, gently lifting one of the mewling bobcat babies. Its fur was still damp from the hasty rinse a paramedic had applied to wash away debris. The second kitten lay curled in the carrier, a pitiful ball of singed fur. Mark's eyes flicked to Jana, searching for guidance. "I think the mother ran behind the house," Jana explained. "Looks like the Hernandezes were running some kind of rescue center in their own backyard. We need to regroup, see if we can contain the situation. She's stressed and she could run off again, but maybe the best bet is to bring her babies to her." Natalie overheard. "We can't just wander back there unprotected," she pointed out, wiping soot from her forehead. "The mother might interpret that as a threat, and the house is still unstable." Despite these warnings, curiosity and compassion won out. They needed to ensure the Bobcat family was safe. With smoke swirling overhead, Natalie assigned 2 more firefighters to help. Together, they circled to the backyard, approaching carefully. At each step, the brittle grass crunched under their boots. Jana carried the small carrier, trying to keep the Bobcat kittens as calm as possible, while Mark held a second carrier lent by one of the neighbors who kept cats of her own. As they reached the enclosure, the mother bobcat emerged halfway from the shadows, ears flattened. In the better light, Jana could see her fur was singed along one flank. The cat's side rose and fell with rapid breaths, and her eyes flashed with protective fury. She set her rescued kitten down, and it stumbled, letting out a plaintive cry for its siblings. Jana gently placed the carrier on the ground, opening the latch so the 2 kittens could crawl toward their mother. The mother bobcat watched intently, her tail swishing in an agitated rhythm. Anxious moments passed, but then curiosity seemed to overcome the cat's fear. She inched closer, nose twitching. One kitten scrambled into the open, drawn by its mother's scent. The mother bobcat began grooming it, emitting soft, low vocalizations that were almost heartbreakingly tender. The second kitten followed, tumbling onto a patch of grass. The mother sniffed them both and then nudged them, taking a quick moment to nuzzle the kitten she'd carried away from the flames. Jana and Mark exchanged a look of relief. At least now the family was reunited, safe from immediate harm. But as they surveyed the makeshift rescue enclosure, an unsettling question arose. Were there more animals in need? Tucked under tarps and inside wooden crates could be all kinds of creatures. Jana counted 4 smaller pens, each padlocked, presumably to contain stray dogs or other wildlife. She also saw an open chicken coop with half a dozen vacant nesting boxes. A sense of urgency knotted in her stomach. If the Hernandezes had other rescues, perhaps injured or sick animals, they might still be inside that house or somewhere on the property, vulnerable to smoke and heat. "Look," Mark said, pointing to another small structure behind the enclosure. It was shaped like a shed with a half-painted door and a missing window pane. The overhead porch light revealed a sign that read, "Rehab Room," scrawled in bold black letters. The padlock on the door dangled open, suggesting someone had entered recently. But the real shock was the handle, which looked scorched and twisted as though touched by intense heat. The structure wasn't on fire, yet thick black soot streaked the walls, a harbinger that flames had licked dangerously close. Jana felt her pulse spike. "We need to check inside," she said. "If they had animals recuperating in there, they might be trapped." "Agreed," Natalie replied, stepping over. She signaled for the rest of the crew to continue dousing the main house, though it was almost fully engulfed. The firefighters had to contend not just with flames, but with precarious sections of roof that threatened to collapse at any second. "Mark, Jana, careful. We don't know what we'll find." Inhaling shakily, Jana approached the shed, hand hovering near the door. She half expected the bobcat mother to protest, but the cat was too busy tending to her kittens. Mark raised his flashlight. The door swung inward with a creak. Inside, the beam lit up a scene that made Jana's stomach twist. The small interior looked like a makeshift veterinary station, with bandages, antiseptics, and containers of medication stacked on shelves. 2 metal crates stood against the wall, both draped with blankets, and something within the crates began to stir. Cautiously, Jana stepped forward and lifted the edge of one blanket. Her jaw dropped. A pair of orphaned javelina piglets stared back at her with wide, fearful eyes. In the other crate, she caught a glimpse of a prick-eared coyote pup, trembling behind a shredded towel. It was as though the entire desert had found refuge in this humble backyard. She realized that Juan and Rosa must have spent countless hours nursing these animals, hoping to release them back into the wild once they recovered. And now, with the house ablaze, their hidden haven was in jeopardy. Before Jana could say more, Mark checked the temperature of the shed walls. "They're warm to the touch," he said tersely. "If the fire spreads, this place is done for." Jana immediately thought of the mother bobcat. How had she found her way into the house? Perhaps she'd come to nurse her litter in a quiet corner, trusting the safety of the Hernandez home. If Rosa and Juan weren't here, who would save the rest of these animals? Jana squared her shoulders. "We can't leave them," she murmured, eyes darting to Mark. "Agreed," he said, already unhooking the crates. Outside, the mother bobcat hissed at the sound of metal dragging, but she didn't budge from her corner with her kittens. Jana braced herself, knowing the risk. Once they removed these animals, controlling them could be a massive challenge. But the alternative, leaving them to the mercy of fire or smoke, was unthinkable. Jana gently lifted the first crate, feeling the metal warm beneath her fingertips, while Mark approached the second crate with the coyote pup. The piglets squealed in alarm, pressing their snouts against the crate door. Jana's voice was soft as she tried to soothe them, though she doubted they could understand. Outside, the sound of crackling flames continued, punctuated by the hiss of water jets aimed at the roof. She and Mark exchanged a nod. There wasn't much time. The mother bobcat eyed them warily from a corner of the yard. Jana worried the noise might stress the cat further, but the mother seemed more concerned with her own brood. A wave of relief washed over Jana, knowing the bobcat was safe for now. Their immediate concern was preventing the spread of the fire to the shed, where these helpless animals were still at risk. They maneuvered carefully through the narrow shed door. Jana could feel the tension in Mark's posture. Though they had no illusions about taming wild animals, their rescue training taught them how to handle frightened creatures. Even so, each step they took made the piglets squeal louder, attracting the coyote pup's anxious whines from the adjacent crate. Finally, they reached the open air. Jana carried the javelina piglets, while Mark held the coyote pup's crate, mindful of his thick gloves. One good nip from a distressed coyote could still inflict damage. The night sky was tinted an eerie orange from the flames dancing across the roof. A small group of neighbors, including paramedics, had gathered near the driveway. Some took videos on their phones, marveling at the unexpected drama unfolding in their normally quiet street. Natalie stood near the fence, conferring with a local animal control officer who had just arrived. Jana could see them gesturing in the direction of the bobcat, presumably strategizing the safest way to corral mother and kittens without inciting panic. As Jana and Mark emerged with the crates, they drew startled gasps from onlookers who hadn't realized how many different species might be sheltered here. "Are there more in the shed?" Natalie asked, voice edged with worry. "I don't think so," Jana replied. "But there's a ton of medical supplies in there, so the Hernandez couple must have been treating animals. They have quite the operation." "We'll need to move these little ones to a safe location," Natalie said, glancing at the crates. There's no telling how long that house might burn, and the smoke could still drift into the shed. As if on cue, the wind shifted, blowing a fresh wave of smoke across the backyard. Jana felt her eyes sting as ash rained down. The paramedics motioned them toward an open area away from the house. There, they had set up a makeshift triage site. A few portable kennels had been scrounged from neighbors who owned pets. Jana gently placed the javelina crate into one kennel. Mark followed suit with the coyote pup. "Where on earth did these come from?" muttered a paramedic, eyeing the piglets. "You don't see that every day." Jana gave a half smile. "They must have been rescued from the desert. If these folks were rehabilitating them, they might have been waiting for a proper wildlife center to take them. Hard to know without talking to the owners." A flicker of concern crossed Mark's face. "We still don't know where Juan and Rosa are. If they planned to be out of town longer, these animals would have been unsupervised. Lucky we got here when we did." Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed across the yard. Everyone flinched. A large portion of the roof caved in, sending sparks skyward. Jana's stomach twisted. The old house was practically unsalvageable. Her gaze darted to the mother bobcat. She was pressed flat against the ground, eyes wide with terror. Her kittens huddled around her, tails flipping in agitation. Someone coughed from inhaling too much smoke, a jarring reminder they were still in a danger zone. The animal control officer approached, carrying a large net and a collapsible cage. "We can't leave the bobcat family out in the open," he said, directing his words at Natalie. "But we also don't want to tranquilize her if we don't have to. It's risky with nursing kittens, especially if they inhaled smoke. Best case scenario, we coax her into a quiet crate. We can move them all to a wildlife rescue facility for observation." Natalie nodded, sweat mixing with soot on her brow. "We'll do what's safest for the animals and the community. We can barricade part of the yard so the mother feels less threatened." Jana spoke up. "She seems to trust us enough to let us near the kittens. At least she hasn't attacked. Maybe Mark and I can help gently guide her toward a cage with the kittens. I'm guessing she'll follow if she doesn't sense danger." The plan took shape quickly. Using metal fencing panels stored along the property line, the firefighters fashioned a small corridor that led from the bobcat's corner of the yard to a sturdy cage placed about 30 feet away. They draped tarps along the sides so the cat couldn't see the crowd of onlookers, hoping to minimize her anxiety. Then Jana set the carrier with the two kittens, now gently herded back inside, near the entrance of the crate. The mother still held one kitten in her mouth, and Jana prayed the lure of her own offspring would guide her in. Despite the tension, an almost reverent hush fell over the yard as everyone stepped back. The mother bobcat, still watchful, twitched her ears at the faint mewls coming from the carrier. Slowly she rose on tentative legs, still clutching the kitten. Mark and Jana stood at the far end, arms raised calmly, maintaining a wide berth. Each breath felt like an eternity. In a move that seemed surprisingly deliberate, the mother bobcat took one measured step forward, then another. She paused to sniff the ground, scanning for threats. The hush continued, broken only by the roar of fire a dozen yards away. Jana's heart drummed against her ribs. At last, the cat crept inside the corridor, drawn by the cries of her young. She placed the kitten in front of the carrier, nudged it toward the others, and then peered inside, tail flicking in agitation. Jana gave Mark a quick nod. This was their moment to act. Moving slowly, Mark stepped behind the crate and eased the gate shut. Jana reached over, her hands steady, and latched it. The mother bobcat spun around, startled, but saw no direct threat, just a metal barrier preventing escape. She didn't lunge or snarl, merely stared at the humans with a mix of fear and resignation. They had done it. The bobcat family was confined, but together and out of immediate harm's way. Sighs of relief rippled through the onlookers. Jana's shoulders sagged, tension draining from her as she realized they had avoided a dangerous confrontation. The mother bobcat curled around her kittens, licking each one as if to confirm they were unhurt. Embers still drifted in the air, but at least this small part of the crisis had a hopeful outcome. Within minutes, paramedics arrived with specialized cages and sedation equipment. As the mother bobcat glared from behind the steel bars, her kittens mewed plaintively, occasionally poking their tiny noses through the gaps. Jana took slow, measured breaths, scanning the yard for any additional signs of wildlife. The pungent smell of wet ash lingered, and overhead, the night sky grew darker still, as if refusing to reveal the faint light of dawn. Though the immediate danger had passed, she couldn't shake the sense there was more to discover. Mark crouched near the coyote pup, who paced restlessly in its crate. He gently slid a dish of water inside, mindful of the pup's sharp teeth. The paramedic who had helped with the piglets now joined him, holding a notepad. "We're taking them to the nearest wildlife rehab center, right?" she asked, scribbling down notes. Mark nodded. "It's about 20 minutes away, but I'm guessing they'll need specialized care, not just a standard shelter." Meanwhile, Natalie stepped aside to make a phone call, presumably to coordinate resources. Jana overheard snatches, references to local game wardens, a licensed rehabilitator, perhaps even the need for law enforcement. After all, the property might not comply with local regulations. She felt a pang of sympathy for the Hernandez couple whose intentions seemed so pure. They had risked fines, possibly worse, to care for these creatures in need. Lost in thought, Jana nearly jumped when a neighbor tapped her shoulder. "Sorry," he said softly. "I just wanted to help. My name's Miguel. I live across the street." In the dim glow of a street lamp, Jana recognized him from earlier, anxiously pacing near the paramedics. "I know Rosa and Juan. They're good people. They never had children of their own, so they poured their hearts into rescuing animals. They never turned away a single stray." He glanced at the battered crates. "Any word on them?" Jana shook her head. "We haven't heard. Were they definitely out of town?" Miguel nodded. "They left 2 days ago for a family reunion in Southern California. They planned to be gone at least a week. Didn't you find a caretaker inside?" The question hung heavy. If the fire had trapped a caretaker, the entire outcome could change in an instant. Jana's stomach twisted. She glanced at the charred remnants of the house. "Not yet. We're still investigating." Just then, Mark approached. "Jana, I think we need another sweep of the property. The main fire is under control, but pockets of heat remain." He lowered his voice. "And I overheard the paramedics mention finding something unusual near the back fence line." Jana felt her pulse quicken. "Unusual how?" she pressed. Mark's expression was grim. "They said they found footprints, big ones, leading away from the yard. Possibly an adult cat, maybe a mountain lion, or something else entirely." Jana exhaled slowly, bracing herself. "Let's check it out. But we need to be careful. Could be a stray cougar, could be a large dog. We won't know until we see for ourselves." The two of them skirted the array of crates and animal supplies, heading deeper into the backyard. The ground was uneven, dotted with half-dug holes and piles of old lumber. Desert shrubs clustered near the fence, forming natural hiding places for anything on 4 legs. In the distance, sirens still whined, but the immediate chaos had calmed. As they neared the fence, Jana spotted fresh impressions in the dirt. A trail led to a portion where the fence was bent, as though something heavy had pushed through. Shine from Mark's flashlight revealed clumps of fur snagged on the metal. Jana crouched to examine it, heart pounding. The color was darker than the bobcat's, almost blackish-brown with coarse strands. "This isn't from our mother bobcat," she murmured. "Could be a dog or coyote, but it looks thicker. Maybe even a small bear." Mark's eyes widened. "A black bear here? It's rare, but they do wander sometimes. especially if they catch a scent of food. But with all these animals, who knows what got attracted? They followed the tracks another few steps before they vanished into scrub brush. The dryness of the Arizona landscape meant footprints could quickly disappear, but these left distinct, deep impressions. Jana felt a chill despite the lingering heat. Something large had been on this property, possibly lured by the smell of the animals or the chaos of the fire. They turned back, only to find Miguel waiting nervously. "I was curious if you found anything," he said, voice trembling. Jana hesitated but decided honesty was best. "We found tracks leading away from the yard. We're not certain what kind of animal it was." Miguel swallowed hard. "I hope it's gone. The kids around here play outside at night sometimes." Mark squeezed the man's shoulder reassuringly. "We'll have animal control do a thorough search, but so far it doesn't seem like it's still around." They returned to the makeshift triage area, where the paramedics and the animal control officer continued to prep the rescue crates. The mother Bobcat had settled somewhat, allowing her kittens to nurse quietly. Now that the immediate threat was gone, the cat's body language conveyed exhaustion rather than aggression. Jana couldn't help feeling an odd sense of admiration for the creature. She had risked everything to save her babies, running back into a house fully consumed by flames. Natalie joined them, phone in hand. "I just got off with the Wildlife Rehab Center. They can take the bobcats, the piglets, and the coyote pup. We've also got a local rescue group that can temporarily house these animals until the owners are located. The fire marshal has declared the house a total loss, so the Hernandezes won't be coming back to a livable home. At least the backyard structures are intact. Could have been much worse." A pained expression crossed Jana's face as she pictured the kindly couple returning to ashes. "What about Juan and Rosa?" she asked softly. "Any chance they're on the road heading back early?" Natalie shrugged. "We tried calling their cell numbers. No answer. We left messages. The local sheriff in California has been contacted just in case something happened. For now, we have to assume they're safe." Miguel spoke up, hunching his shoulders. "Rosa would be devastated to lose those animals. She called them her desert babies." His voice wavered, and Jana felt a lump rise in her throat. The selflessness of the Hernandezes made this night all the more poignant. People took for granted the quietly kind souls who rescued strays from the scorching desert. Now, that kindness faced a colossal setback. Despite everything, a gentle optimism settled in. The Bobcat family was together, the Javelina piglets were rescued, and the coyote pup was safe from the choking smoke. The reflection of flames still danced in the night sky, but at least the scene no longer felt desperate. Jana found herself thinking of the footprints beyond the fence. Whatever larger creature roamed off into the darkness, it hadn't disrupted the rescue. She hoped it would stay that way. The next morning arrived like a reluctant guest, draping the charred home in a stark light that revealed every warped beam and scorched remnant. The flames had finally died in the early hours, leaving behind steaming piles of debris and blackened furniture. Neighbors stood on the sidewalk, whispering sympathy and disbelief at the extent of the damage. Despite the wreckage, the backyard shed remained intact, now empty of the wildlife that had once taken shelter there. Jana and Mark arrived early, having barely slept. They were still dressed in civilian clothes, faded jeans and old t-shirts, rather than their official firefighting gear. After last night's upheaval, the department gave them a brief reprieve. Both felt an inexplicable pull to return, ensuring that the transition of the rescued animals went smoothly. Part of them wanted closure, but another part worried something else might have been overlooked. The unsettling footprints by the fence still nagged at their minds. The temporary animal triage station, once set up on the driveway, was gone. The Bobcat family, Javelina piglets, and coyote pup had been transported to a wildlife rehab facility on the outskirts of Phoenix. Jana felt relief knowing professionals were tending to them. vets with years of experience in wildlife rehabilitation. She planned to check in later, but for now she and Mark had a different task: meeting the fire marshal. They found the fire marshal, Francisco Frank Ortiz, near the front porch, scribbling in a notepad. He was a broad-shouldered man in his mid-50s, known for his meticulous investigations. He looked up when Jana and Mark approached, nodding curtly. "Morning. I was about to finish my initial report." Jana peered at the charred doorway, recalling how the mother Bobcat had refused to leave until she'd retrieved her kitten. "Have you found any sign of a caretaker inside?" she asked quietly. Frank shook his head. "No human remains, no pets, nothing else. It appears the structure was completely empty. That lines up with the story that Juan and Rosa Hernandez were out of town." He flipped a page in his notepad. "However, we did find evidence of an electrical short in the attic. That's likely the cause of the blaze." Mark studied the house's skeletal frame, swallowing hard. "No chance something else started it?" Frank shrugged. "Never say never, but all signs point to faulty wiring. The place is old. Neighbors said the Hernandezes did a lot of DIY work, which isn't always up to code." He glanced up at the caved-in roof. "They were lucky the fire department responded so fast. Another 20 minutes, and we could have had a neighborhood inferno." Jana nodded, a wave of gratitude surging for her fellow firefighters. Still, she couldn't shake the lingering concern over the footprints behind the fence. She decided to voice it. "We found some large tracks last night. Possible bear, maybe. Did your team spot anything similar?" Frank frowned, flipping to a fresh page. "We did a perimeter check this morning. There are tracks, yes, unusually large, about 3 inches in width, maybe 4 in length. Could be a large dog or a smaller bear. We found some dark fur snagged on the chain link, but I haven't confirmed the species. I bagged it for analysis." He paused. "The footprints lead off into a wash behind the property. With so many scattered desert lots around, an animal could come and go undetected." Mark rested his hands on his hips. "So we're dealing with a mystery animal. That's not entirely unusual around here, but it's still concerning. Should we notify the community?" Frank nodded. "I'd recommend posting an alert. Remind people to keep pets indoors at night, secure their trash cans. Standard precautions. It's up to the Arizona Game and Fish Department to investigate further. I'll pass the info along." Satisfied, Jana and Mark thanked him and stepped aside, letting Frank continue his inspection. In the distance, a wail of sirens indicated another call. Even in daylight, the city's emergencies never slowed. Jana felt the exhaustion of the night's ordeal crash over her, but she had one more priority: checking on the animals at the rehab center. "Ready to go?" Mark asked softly, glancing at the ash-covered grass. Jana nodded. They returned to Mark's pickup, grateful for the air conditioning when they climbed in. The truck rumbled away from the devastated house, leaving behind that haunting silhouette. 40 minutes later, they pulled into the gravel parking lot of the Desert Haven Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. The building was a nondescript single-story structure surrounded by fenced enclosures, each designed to replicate natural habitats for recovery. A friendly sign out front bore a paw print logo beside the words, "Helping Arizona's Wildlife Return Home." They walked through the main entrance, where the distinctive smell of disinfectant and fur hovered. A soft-spoken receptionist greeted them, instantly recognizing their names from the night's emergency calls. She paged the center's lead veterinarian, who emerged within minutes. Dr. Angelique Davis was in her late 30s, wearing khaki cargo pants and a polo emblazoned with the facility's logo. She had keen eyes that spoke of experience, and she wasted no time. "You must be the firefighters who brought us quite the assortment," she began, beckoning them down a hallway. "We took in a bobcat mother with 3 kittens, 2 javelina piglets, and a coyote pup, all showing varying levels of smoke inhalation. Jana's heart pounded a little faster, relief and worry mingling. Are they okay? Dr. Davis pursed her lips thoughtfully. The bobcat and kittens are stable but stressed. One kitten has minor burns on its paws. We're treating with topical ointments and keeping them isolated in our quiet ward. We don't want to mix them with other rescues yet. As for the piglets, they're doing better than expected, just dehydrated. The coyote pup is the most anxious, possibly from past trauma, but physically he's fine. Mark exhaled. That's good to hear. How long will they stay here? Likely a few weeks, depending on their recovery. The bobcat family will need to be evaluated before release, especially the mother. She's protective, which is a good sign, but we want to ensure she can hunt properly once returned to the wild. The piglets and pup might stay longer. Javelinas can be tricky. Often they need a very controlled environment to avoid imprinting on humans. They reached a window that looked into a dimly lit room. The mother bobcat sat in a corner, her ears swiveling at every small sound. A pair of thick gloves and a net hung on the wall nearby. Precautions Dr. Davis explained were necessary in case the bobcat panicked. The kittens slept in a padded nest, all three clustered together like smoky-colored fuzzballs. Jana's eyes misted. Seeing them alive and cared for felt like a victory. What happens if Juan and Rosa Hernandez return and want them back? Jana asked, her voice laced with genuine curiosity. She felt torn, knowing the couple cherished these creatures, yet also knowing proper wildlife care was a complex matter. Dr. Davis shook her head kindly. Wild animals like these bobcats belong in the wild, not in someone's home. The Hernandez family could face legal consequences if they intended to keep them as pets. However, if they were legitimate volunteers or had permits for wildlife rehabilitation, that's another matter. We need more information, but typically these animals won't be going back to a private residence. Our aim is to rehabilitate and release. Mark gazed at the bobcat kittens who were now stirring. I can't blame the Hernandezes for wanting to help. They seemed like genuine animal lovers. Dr. Davis nodded. Many well-meaning folks don't realize how complicated it can be. Handling orphaned wildlife requires stringent protocols, diets, vaccinations, eventual release strategies. Even the mother bobcat must be carefully monitored to ensure she doesn't become too habituated to humans. Jana reached for Mark's hand, giving it a small squeeze. She felt an emotional tug, remembering the mother's fiery protectiveness amidst swirling embers. She was relieved the family had a chance at survival, even if it meant staying under professional care for a while. They thanked Dr. Davis and moved on to see the javelinas and the coyote pup in the adjacent ward. Behind a glass partition, the piglets nestled in a warm enclosure filled with straw, grunting softly. The pup occupied a separate pen, pacing and occasionally sniffing the air. Jana noticed the pup stiffen at their presence, a testament to its wild instincts. No wagging tail, no friendly approach. Even so, relief flooded her at the sight of these animals saved from certain disaster. Thank you for letting us visit, Mark said, turning to Dr. Davis. We'll keep in touch in case there's an update on the owners, or if you need any help. Dr. Davis smiled. Certainly. We appreciate all you did. If not for your quick actions, I doubt the bobcat kittens would have survived. Then her tone grew serious. But do let us know about any developments with the rest of the property. We've only scratched the surface of how many animals might have come through their backyard rehab setup. Jana nodded. As they left, her mind wandered to the tracks behind the fence again, that phantom creature that might still be wandering the desert. Perhaps it too was drawn by some quiet link to the Hernandez sanctuary. She couldn't shake the feeling that their work wasn't finished and that a broader mystery still lurked beyond the flames. Jana and Mark stepped out into the relentless Arizona sunlight, the bright glare forcing them to squint. The crisp, air-conditioned interior of the rehab center felt like another world compared to the dusty parking lot. Despite the heat, Jana felt a chill run up her spine as she recalled the lingering questions. The animals were safe for now, but what about that unknown predator? And where were Juan and Rosa? They climbed into Mark's truck, letting the engine idle a moment while they gathered their thoughts. Outside, a small group of volunteers arrived, presumably to help feed and care for the newly admitted wildlife. Jana watched them unloading bags of feed, crates, and medical supplies, and she felt a surge of gratitude that so many people wanted to help. It gave her hope that the bobcats and other animals had a good chance of recovering. "Do you think we should call the Hernandezes again?" Mark asked, scrolling through his phone. "We tried last night, but maybe they'll answer now." Jana nodded. "We need to do everything we can to reach them. They might not know any of this happened. Imagine coming home to find your entire house gone." Mark punched in the number that the fire department had on file. The call rang several times before going to voicemail, a generic recording, not even a personalized message. He tried Rosa's phone too, with the same result. Jana felt a gnawing worry. What if something had happened to them on the road? Or maybe they were simply out of reception range. She tried to push away the darker thoughts. "Let's drive by the station," Jana suggested. "See if there's any update from the sheriff's office or from any relatives of the Hernandezes. I want to make sure we're not missing something." Mark put the truck in gear, and they headed down the highway. The flat desert stretching out on either side, dotted with saguaros and the occasional tumbleweed. The memory of last night's flames lingered in their minds, as if the acrid smell of smoke still clung to their clothes. Jana caught herself scanning the horizon for large shapes, half expecting a mysterious creature to amble into view. But the desert seemed calm, with only shimmering heat waves rising off the pavement. They arrived at the fire station to find a subdued atmosphere. Several colleagues were cleaning gear, scrubbing down trucks, and reorganizing hoses. Everyone looked tired. The previous night's fire call had kept them on high alert for hours. Jana and Mark found Chief Natalie Ruiz in her office, poring over paperwork. She waved them in, relief momentarily flickering across her features. "Any word on the Hernandez couple?" Jana asked, settling into a chair opposite Natalie's cluttered desk. Natalie shook her head. "Nothing yet. The local sheriff in California said he'd look into whether they'd actually arrived at their family reunion, but there's been no official report back." She rubbed her temples. "We did hear from one of Rosa's sisters, though. She said Rosa was supposed to call when they got to California, but never did. She assumed they were busy." Mark frowned. "That's odd. You'd think they'd check in if they were traveling, especially if they left so many animals behind." Natalie sighed. "It raises questions, that's for sure. But for now, we can't treat it as a missing persons case without more evidence. The property damage is extensive, but we don't have reason to believe anything sinister happened. It could be a simple case of them being out of cell phone range. Maybe they're hiking or their phones died." Jana mulled this over. She felt a nagging sensation that something was off. Maybe it was the footprints or the scorched handle on that backyard shed door. "I just want to be sure we're not ignoring something important," she said, voicing her worry. Natalie's gaze softened. "I understand. Keep me updated if you learn anything new. For now, I've filed all the necessary reports with the fire marshal and animal control. The ball's in their court." She closed a file folder on her desk. "Try to get some rest. Both of you look dead on your feet." Outside the office, Jana and Mark exchanged a glance. Their shifts were officially over, but neither wanted to go home just yet. They ended up grabbing cold drinks from a vending machine and heading to a shaded bench behind the station. The metal seat felt scorching under Jana's legs, even through her jeans. "You know," Mark mused, twisting the cap off his water bottle, "before last night I never thought about how someone could run a mini wildlife sanctuary in a suburban backyard. It's kind of amazing." Jana nodded. remembering the neatly labeled bowls and the carefully built enclosures. It is. They must have poured their hearts and money into that place. But it also puts them in a complicated spot legally. If they didn't have permits, there could be repercussions. Mark sighed. I just hope they're safe. Maybe we should swing by Miguel's place. He might know of any backup caretaker or someone the Hernandezes trusted with their animals when they traveled. Jana brightened. That's a good idea. He lives right across the street from them, so maybe he's got more details. They finished their drinks, hopped back into Mark's truck, and navigated the midday traffic toward the Hernandez neighborhood. When they arrived, the once crowded street was quiet, with only a few lingering signs of last night's commotion. Damp patches on the pavement, yellow caution tape flapping near the burned house, and a faint smoky smell that still clung to the air. Miguel answered the door almost immediately, as though he'd been waiting for someone. He looked tired but offered a courteous smile. "Come in," he said, motioning them inside. His living room was cozy, the walls lined with family photos. A ceiling fan whirred overhead, providing a bit of relief from the midday heat. They sat on a sofa while Miguel perched on an armchair. Jana noticed he had a bandage on his right arm, perhaps a burn or scrape from the chaos. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently. Miguel exhaled. "Could be better. Hard to sleep after watching my neighbor's house go up in flames." He rubbed his arm absent-mindedly. "Wish I could have done more." Mark nodded empathetically. "We were wondering if you knew anyone who might have been checking in on the Hernandez animals, a friend, volunteer, or hired caretaker." Miguel pursed his lips. "Juan usually handled the day-to-day, but sometimes a guy named Armando would come by to help. I don't know much about him, just that he met Juan through some local rescue group. He'd show up in a beat-up truck and stay for a couple hours. That's all I ever noticed." Jana leaned forward. "Do you have any idea how to contact him?" Miguel shook his head. "Sorry, no. Rosa once mentioned he lived out near Apache Junction, but that's all I know." His brow furrowed. "Do you think he was there when the fire broke out?" "It's possible," Mark said softly. "We didn't find anyone inside, but if he'd stepped out or left earlier in the evening, maybe he saw something." Miguel frowned. "If I see him around, I'll let you know, but I haven't seen that old truck in a couple weeks." He paused, chewing his lip as though debating whether to share more. "You should know that the Hernandezes received some threats a while back. A neighbor complained about them attracting wild animals. They had a heated argument in front of the house. I wasn't around to hear the details, but Rosa was really shaken." Jana and Mark exchanged a concerned glance. "Threats?" Jana echoed. "Any chance you know who made them?" Miguel shrugged apologetically. "No idea. The Hernandezes never wanted to talk about it, like they didn't want to cause trouble. But it wasn't just random. Someone was angry they kept bringing in more animals." A tension settled in the room. Jana recalled the bent section of fencing and the dark fur they'd found. Could it be related? Or was it purely coincidence? Even if the threats were real, it didn't mean someone purposely set the fire. Yet the possibility nagged at her. They thanked Miguel for his time and left, minds spinning with new questions. Jana felt a roiling mixture of worry and intrigue. Threats, a mysterious caretaker, and an unidentified predator. Could these threads tie together somehow? Or were they separate strands of a complicated story? Outside, the late afternoon sun bore down, a harsh reminder of nature's unrelenting power. Jana shielded her eyes, thinking of the mother bobcat who'd risked her life for her kittens. Now those kittens lay safe in a rehab center, while the human pieces of the puzzle remained frustratingly unresolved. She glanced at Mark, whose forehead creased in the same thoughtful frown. "Let's see if we can find this Armando," she said, a spark of determination in her voice. One more clue might explain everything. Leaving Miguel's house, Jana and Mark felt an urgent need to chase every possible lead. The notion that someone had threatened the Hernandezes for rescuing wild animals weighed on them like a stone. Despite the scorching sun that radiated off the asphalt, neither wanted to delay. They decided to start by asking around at local animal shelters and rescue groups. If Armando was involved in volunteer work, someone might remember his last name or know where he lived. They made their first stop at a small non-profit called Desert Life Rescue, a modest storefront wedged between a laundry and a thrift shop. Inside, the cool air smelled faintly of cat litter and disinfectant. A volunteer behind the counter greeted them with a polite smile that quickly turned to concern when they explained the situation. The volunteer invited them into a cramped office, cluttered with pet supplies, brochures, and stacks of paperwork. An older woman named Harriet, with iron-gray hair pulled tight into a bun, listened attentively. She was the shelter's coordinator and seemed to know every volunteer by name. She scanned her files with methodical precision. Occasionally, she jotted notes on a yellow legal pad, brow furrowing in concentration. Jana and Mark waited, noticing the hum of an oscillating fan and the muffled meows from a back room. At last, Harriet closed a file folder and sighed. "I've got a record of a man named Armando Flores, but he hasn't volunteered here for at least 6 months. He used to help with dog fosters, especially stray mutts from the desert. His address on file is in Apache Junction, but I can't guarantee it's current." She handed Mark a small slip of paper. "I'm afraid that's all I've got." He wasn't one for small talk. Mark read the information quickly and passed it to Jana. An address and phone number, though the phone had been disconnected during his last month of volunteering. Harriet added that Armando had a reputation for being passionate, sometimes too passionate, about wildlife rescue. He'd argue with anyone who suggested returning animals to the wild too soon, she recalled, said they were safer with humans, which often led to heated discussions, but I never knew him to cause harm. Jana tucked the note into her pocket. "This is incredibly helpful, thank you." She and Mark thanked Harriet, promising to follow up if they learned anything new about Armando's connection to the Hernandezes. Outside, the late afternoon sun scorched them again, making Jana squint. Still, she felt a spark of hope. They had a full name and an address, a far better starting point than speculation alone. They grabbed a quick meal at a nearby diner, inhaling sandwiches and cold drinks at the counter. Neither felt much like chatting. Their thoughts revolved around the missing couple and the bizarre footprints behind the burned house. Jana kept recalling the mother bobcat's frantic rescue. It was an image she couldn't shake. Those fearless eyes in the face of smoke and fire. By mid-afternoon, they were driving east on the highway toward Apache Junction. The city gradually gave way to more rugged terrain, the horizon studded with jagged mountains. The address led them to a dusty neighborhood where houses sat far apart on large lots, dotted with creosote bushes and the occasional mesquite tree. Dirt roads branched off the main highway, winding through a landscape that felt more remote than suburban. Mark's truck bounced over potholes, each jolt rattling them in their seats. After a wrong turn or two, they arrived at the coordinates listed on Harriet's slip of paper. The property looked neglected, a single-wide trailer perched on cinder blocks, shutters hanging crooked, and a chain-link fence half buried in wind-blown sand. A sagging carport sheltered an old truck with peeling paint, perhaps the very one Miguel had seen. Weeds and desert scrub grew high around the trailer, and the air felt eerily still, as though even the insects avoided this place. They parked outside the fence. Jana stepped out, scanning for movement. "You think anyone's home?" she asked quietly. Mark shrugged. "There's no sign of activity, but let's knock." A hollow sense of unease pricked Jana's skin, yet they both proceeded. The gate screeched as they opened it, and the crunch of their footsteps on gravel echoed through the otherwise silent yard. When they reached the trailer's porch, Mark knocked firmly on the battered door. No answer. He knocked again, and a dog barked faintly from somewhere inside, but no human voice responded. Jana peered through a window, only to see dusty curtains. "We could try again later," she said, glancing at Mark. He hesitated, then called out, "Armando, we just want to talk. It's about Juan and Rosa Hernandez." Still no response. The dog inside barked again, this time sounding more agitated. Jana looked around the porch. A bowl of dried dog food sat near a metal water dish filled with murky liquid. She felt a stab of pity. "Someone's been feeding the dog," she murmured. "But who knows how regularly." She rapped her knuckles on the window. "Armando, are you in there?" At last, a faint movement flickered behind the curtains. Jana's heart jumped. Slowly, the door opened a crack, revealing a lean man in rumpled clothes. His eyes darted from Jana to Mark. "Who are you?" he demanded, voice hoarse. A stale odor drifted out. Sweat, cigarette smoke, and something else Jana couldn't place. Mark offered a half-smile. "We're firefighters from Mesa. We're looking for Armando Flores. Are you Armando?" The man blinked a few times, then nodded cautiously. "What do you want?" His grip tightened on the doorknob as if ready to slam it shut. Jana spoke gently. "We're trying to locate Juan and Rosa Hernandez, the people you volunteered with. Their house caught fire last night. They're missing. We heard you sometimes helped care for their animals." Armando's face went slack with surprise. He opened the door a bit wider. "They're missing? I didn't know." He looked genuinely stunned, and Jana wondered if he might be telling the truth. "I haven't been by their place in weeks. Juan said they were traveling, so I figured I'd check in on the animals after they got back." He shook his head, stepping out onto the porch. The dog inside barked again, but he ignored it. Mark studied him. "So you didn't know the house burned down?" Armando's eyes flickered with alarm. "No. God, is everyone all right? What about their animals?" Jana explained how they'd rescued several creatures, including a mother bobcat and her kittens, a pair of javelina piglets, and a coyote pup, all now at a wildlife rehabilitation center. The tension in Armando's posture softened a fraction. "Good. Rosa was always finding critters, hurt, abandoned. They'd do anything to help." He trailed off, glancing at the desert beyond his fence. Mark pressed on. "Any idea why they left the animals behind without a caretaker? Miguel mentioned you'd show up with your truck sometimes, but he hasn't seen you lately." Armando rubbed a hand across his jaw, looking pained. "I had a falling out with Juan a couple of months ago. He thought I was interfering with how he managed the animals. He told me to stay away if I couldn't respect his system. I didn't like that he wanted to release them so quickly. I guess they never called me again." Jana and Mark exchanged a glance. This lined up with Harriet's account of Armando's strong opinions. "Were you aware they received threats about the animals?" Jana asked. Armando nodded slowly. "Yeah, some neighbor freaked out, said the bobcats or coyotes might harm their pets. Juan told me they'd had confrontations, but he never gave me details." He paused, face clouding with an internal struggle. "Listen, I might have been stubborn, but I cared about the work they did. I wouldn't have wanted them hurt." Jana believed him. His voice quivered with sincerity. "If you hear from Juan or Rosa, or learn anything, will you let us know?" she asked, handing him a card with the fire station's number. Armando stared at it, his mouth set in a grim line, before shoving it into his pocket. "Sure," he muttered. "I'm sorry I can't help more." Before leaving, Jana asked if they could see his dog, concerned about its condition. Armando hesitated, then let them inside briefly. The dog, a skinny mutt, wagged its tail nervously. Jana noted its half-empty water bowl. "Make sure you care for this guy," she urged softly. Armando avoided her eyes, but promised he would. Back at the truck, Jana and Mark replayed every word in their minds. Armando appeared genuinely shocked about the fire. If he wasn't responsible, then who had threatened the Hernandezes? And what about the strange footprints in the yard? On the drive back toward Mesa, Jana and Mark navigated the winding roads in thoughtful silence. They were both replaying the conversation with Armando, each clue interweaving with the larger puzzle. Though he had strong opinions about rescuing wildlife, his shock seemed genuine when he learned of the fire. If Armando wasn't responsible for any foul play, and there was no indication he was, then who was behind those threats? And why had Juan and Rosa vanished without a trace? They took a short detour through an isolated stretch of desert, scanning the flat horizon for any sign of unusual activity. A dust devil whirled in the distance, kicking up sand that shimmered in the late-day sun. Jana thought about the peculiar footprints they'd found and wondered if the unidentified animal roamed these very washes. The memory gave her an uneasy feeling, but there was little they could do until Arizona Game and Fish concluded their analysis. Traffic thickened as they neared the city limits. Mark flicked on the radio, hoping for a local news update. A brief bulletin mentioned the fire, stating that a home in Mesa had burned to the ground with no reported casualties. The broadcast asked for any information about the missing homeowners, Juan and Rosa Hernandez, who were presumed out of town. Then it ended abruptly, replaced by an unrelated story about a stalled budget proposal. Jana sighed, frustration simmering. The couple's absence was noted, but no one seemed to know where they'd gone. They pulled into the parking lot of a convenience store, deciding they could use cold drinks and a moment to regroup. Jana leaned against the truck while Mark grabbed bottles of water inside. The sun hung low, painting the desert sky in hues of orange and violet. She checked her phone again. Still no missed calls or messages from the Hernandezes. She hadn't expected an immediate response, but the silence weighed on her. When Mark emerged, he offered her a bottle and tapped a paper pinned to the store's bulletin board. "Look at this." The flyer depicted a photograph of a large, dark-furred creature, a black bear with a scar running across its muzzle. Above it, bold letters read, "Missing or displaced, have you seen this bear?" Jana scanned the text and learned it was part of a local university's wildlife study. The bear, fitted with a GPS collar, had vanished from their tracking system. The last data point showed it roaming near the outskirts of Apache Junction, coincidentally close to where the Hernandez property had been located. Jana felt a jolt. "A black bear with a missing collar near Apache Junction," she read aloud. "Could that explain the footprints we found, the fur on the fence?" Mark nodded, eyes lighting with realization. "It fits. If the collar malfunctioned, the researchers wouldn't know its location. That might be exactly what we stumbled upon behind the Hernandez home." They took a snapshot of the flyer, planning to call the research team. The possibility that a roaming black bear might have wandered into that suburban area wasn't far-fetched. Still, the timing felt odd. Had the bear been drawn by the scent of animals in the backyard sanctuary, or had something else startled it? Jana's mind raced with scenarios. Maybe the bear encountered Juan or Rosa before they left, or perhaps it crossed paths with the unknown neighbor who'd issued threats. Back in the truck, they decided to drive to the station once more, hoping any new information from Arizona Game and Fish might have come in. Night was falling by the time they arrived. A few colleagues were still around, finishing reports. One of them, Captain Hughes, waved them over with a serious expression. "Got a call from the Mesa police," he began. "They're treating the Hernandez case as a missing person situation now. It turns out Rosa's sister reported they never arrived at the reunion. Their car hasn't been spotted on any highway cameras beyond the state line." A cold knot formed in Jana's stomach. "So they never made it to California at all?" she asked. Hughes shook his head. Seems not. Police are checking local hospitals, any roadside incidents, but so far nothing. They asked if we had any leads. Jana and Mark explained everything. The conversation with Armando, the mention of threats, and now this missing black bear possibility. Hughes nodded, soaking up the details. If you can share those footprints with them, it might help rule out certain scenarios, he said, though it sounds more like a coincidence than foul play. Still, every angle counts. After a quick coordination with dispatch, Jana and Mark found themselves placed on a liaison role with the Mesa police for the Hernandez case. They were the ones who had discovered the animals after all and had the most background knowledge. Jana made a mental note to contact the university's bear research team first thing in the morning. Maybe they had updates on the animals' movements, and if the times aligned strangely with the couple's disappearance. Stepping outside the station, Mark released a slow breath. It's turning into something bigger than we expected, he murmured. First, a house fire and a miraculous bobcat rescue. Now, a missing couple, possible threats, a mysterious caretaker, and a black bear that might be roaming neighborhoods. Jana nodded. We can't forget that someone specifically threatened them. That piece still bothers me. Even if a bear was on the property, it wouldn't cause their disappearance days before the fire, unless they encountered it on the road. But that's speculative. They decided to make one final stop before calling it a night, the Animal Rehab Center. Jana wanted to see if the veterinarian, Dr. Davis, had heard anything new or noticed unusual signs in the Bobcat family's condition. She was also curious whether anyone from Game and Fish had visited to check on the rescued animals. By the time they arrived, a deep blue twilight draped the center. Security lights lit the parking lot, and a night shift staffer let them in. They found Dr. Davis in the quiet ward reviewing charts. She greeted them warmly, though her expression turned solemn when they recounted the latest developments about Juan and Rosa officially being missing. I haven't heard anything new, Dr. Davis said, glancing over at the Bobcat enclosure. The mother lay curled protectively around her kittens, all of them breathing in steady unison. But someone from Arizona Game and Fish did stop by to check the animals. They took samples of the bobcat's fur to see if there were any chemical traces from the fire. They also asked if any other large predators had been brought in recently. I assumed they were investigating that missing bear. Jana's eyes widened slightly. So they're connecting the dots too? Dr. Davis shrugged. That's my guess. They didn't share specifics, but they seemed curious about any large-scale injuries or calls related to a bear. She closed a folder gently. How's the mother bobcat holding up? Mark asked, peering through the observation window. The cat's singed fur had been trimmed and treated, revealing pink patches of healing skin. Dr. Davis smiled softly. She's better than expected, a bit stressed but responding to treatment. The kittens are nursing well. It's a best-case scenario for a wild animal that nearly died in a house fire. As Mark and Jana prepared to leave, Dr. Davis offered a final thought. I've worked in wildlife rehab for over a decade. When people vanish around the same time an unusual animal sighting occurs, it often sparks rumors, but usually it's a coincidence. Bears don't typically attack people without a cause, and if the Hernandezes were threatened, that seems more human-driven. Jana nodded, feeling a shiver. Human-driven. That phrase resonated like a warning. Returning to the parking lot, Jana paused under a street lamp. What if the threats were serious and someone decided to sabotage their home while they were away, or confronted them before they even left town? Mark rubbed the back of his neck. We might be dealing with a crime rather than a tragic accident. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but the timing is too suspicious. Neither spoke further as they slipped into the truck. The day had drained them, but the mystery roiled in their minds. They drove off under a sky thick with stars, each tiny light a silent witness to the unfolding story, one that stretched from a burned backyard sanctuary to the wide expanse of the desert night, where a missing couple and a wayward bear hovered like unsolved riddles in the darkness. Jana woke the next morning after a fitful sleep, mind still brimming with questions. She and Mark had agreed to meet at the fire station early, hoping the police might have uncovered some trace of Juan and Rosa overnight. The drive felt surreal. Brilliant desert sunlight framed a perfectly ordinary day, while beneath the surface, a sense of disquiet churned. Had the missing couple fallen victim to a random crime, or was this the culmination of those threats? And where did the rogue black bear fit into the puzzle? Upon arriving, Jana found the station abuzz with controlled chaos. A small brush fire out in the foothills had demanded an early deployment, and several firefighters were racing to load extra gear onto Engine 5. She slipped past them and headed straight for the common room, where Mark sat hunched over a cup of coffee. He looked up, dark circles under his eyes. "Morning," he greeted, though his tone lacked its usual warmth. She poured herself coffee and joined him at the table. "Any updates from Mesa Police?" she asked. Mark swallowed, nodding at his phone. "They sent a message an hour ago. Nothing definitive. They managed to confirm that Juan and Rosa never arrived at their relative's place and never checked into a hotel. That's all. It's like they vanished." He rubbed his temples. "You think they could have had car trouble in the desert? Or an accident off the main roads?" Jana leaned forward, brow knitted. "Possible, but we would have had an alert if a car was found abandoned. The police have a bolo out for their vehicle. With the footprints, the bear sightings, and those threats, something else is going on." Her mind drifted to the burned home, the battered enclosures, and the unwavering devotion of the Bobcat mother. The whole situation felt laden with unspoken implications. Before they could discuss further, Captain Hughes appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. "You two," he said briskly, "come see this." They followed him to a quiet corner near the lockers, where he played a voicemail from a shaky male voice. Hello?" the voice began, breath hitching. "My name is Bill Latham. I live about 2 miles north of the Hernandez place. My dog found a piece of clothing in the desert, looked torn up, maybe burned. Has the name Rosa stitched inside. I saw the news. Just thought you should know. It's near a wash-off Route 88. Jana felt a jolt. "That's not far from Apache Junction," she murmured. "Could it be something she dropped?" Mark looked uneasy. Or she was forced off the road somehow. Hughes ended the voicemail. "I've passed this to the police, but I think you two might want to check it out yourselves, unofficially. You know the backstory better than anyone." Jana and Mark agreed, adrenaline sharpening their senses. Within minutes they were in Mark's truck, route mapped on his phone, heading out under a sweltering late-morning sun. The location was a sandy wash, accessible by a narrow dirt road that branched from Route 88, known locally as the Apache Trail. They soon found Bill Latham, a wiry man in his 60s, waiting with his collie beside a battered Jeep. He raised a hand in greeting, though his expression was troubled. "Glad you came," he said, nodding at the swirling dust behind them. "I wanted to show you where my dog sniffed it out." He led them along a winding path between stands of Palo Verde trees. The wash lay beyond, a swath of dry ground that occasionally filled with rushing water during monsoon season. Half buried in a shallow depression was a torn piece of cloth, ash-stained, edges frayed. As Jana knelt to pick it up, she saw R. Hernandez embroidered in one corner, likely a label Rosa had sewn. Her heart pounded. This was no random trash. "Did you see any other signs of disturbance?" Mark asked, scanning the area. Bill shook his head. Just footprints in the dust. Not sure if they're from last night or older. I had my dog with me, so we didn't linger. Didn't want to mess up the scene. Jana exhaled slowly. Grateful Bill had kept his distance. She crouched, examining the footprints more closely. The ground was dry, easy to crumble underfoot, so the impressions weren't especially crisp. Yet there appeared to be two sets. One smaller, one larger. Could this be Juan and Rosa? She pulled out her phone to photograph the area. Mark walked in widening circles, searching for additional clues. After a few minutes, he called her over. "There's more debris here," he said. She found him crouched near a mesquite tree, studying a few scattered items, a keychain with a sun symbol, a single shoe print, and what looked like a half-melted cell phone battery. Jana's pulse quickened. If this had been Rosa's phone, it might have suffered heat or fire damage. But how did it end up in the wash? They looked at Bill, who shook his head in quiet dismay. "I didn't know them personally, but they seemed nice whenever I drove by." He bent down to give his collie a reassuring pat. "I sure hope they're okay." Jana and Mark exchanged grim looks. With each new clue, the likelihood of a simple explanation shrank. Something had happened to Rosa, and possibly Juan as well. But was it an accident, or had someone forced them here? As Jana collected the items in a plastic evidence bag, Mark tried calling local law enforcement. No immediate answer, likely because the department was juggling multiple incidents. He left a detailed voicemail describing the location and the discoveries. "We'll stay put for a while," he said. "They'll probably send someone to secure the area. This might be part of a crime scene." While they waited, Jana walked along the edge of the wash, scanning for any sign of tire tracks or disturbed brush. The dryness of the desert worked against them. Winds could obliterate tracks in hours. A slight depression in the sand, though, hinted at a vehicle's passage, or maybe a large animal. She followed it a short distance until the wash curved sharply, dipping under a rocky ledge. Rounding the bend, she froze. A chunk of twisted metal jutted from a tangle of bushes. She waved frantically for Mark, who ran over. Together they approached the wreckage. It looked like a chunk of car door, battered and scorched. An acrid smell lingered. Jana's stomach lurched. Could this be the Hernandez vehicle or part of it? They pushed aside the branches, revealing more twisted metal. Though the bulk of any vehicle wasn't immediately visible, it was clear this was no random piece of scrap. Mark's expression darkened. If their car crashed here, the wash might have concealed it, especially if it happened at night. Jana tested her footing on the loose rocks. But how would the door get so far from the main wreck, and what caused the scorch marks? Her mind spun. Could the car have caught fire, forcing them to flee with burnt clothing and damaged phones? She pictured Rosa clutching that torn cloth, stumbling in the darkness. But if that were true, why hadn't they sought help? Or why hadn't rescue teams found them sooner? A flash of color caught her eye. Dangling from a nearby shrub was a strip of bright cloth, maybe from a blouse. Jana recognized the floral pattern from a photograph she'd seen of Rosa. There had been a snapshot in the living room showing Rosa gardening in a blouse just like it. The realization hit her like a punch. She plucked it gently, her heart thudding as she imagined the terror Rosa might have felt. Just then, a distant rumble echoed across the wash, making them both tense. But it was only a truck engine. Bill appeared around the bend, waving from afar. "Sheriff's deputy is here," he called. Jana and Mark glanced at each other, faces etched with worry. They stood at the edge of the hidden wreckage, uncertain whether they were on the verge of answers or stumbling into a darker mystery. In the distance, the setting sun cast lengthening shadows across the rugged terrain, as if to underscore that time was running out. A sheriff's deputy named Wilson arrived at the wash within minutes, radio crackling with background static. He was a tall man with a desert-weathered face, wearing mirrored sunglasses that reflected the apprehension on Jana and Mark's expressions. Bill Latham, looking relieved to hand over responsibility, explained how he found the cloth and led them to this hidden spot. Deputy Wilson thanked him, then asked everyone to step back while he assessed the area. Jana and Mark stood by, uneasy. They showed Wilson the scorched car door fragment and the scattered personal items. The deputy crouched, running gloved fingers across blackened metal and scorched paint. "This definitely looks like part of a vehicle," he said. "If it's the Hernandez car, we need to do a deeper search. There could be a ravine or depression beyond that brush." Everyone worked cautiously, pushing through gnarled mesquite branches. The midday sun beat down, sweat trickling along Jana's forehead. She suppressed the urge to shout the couple's names, knowing it could disrupt any potential evidence. Mark scanned for footprints, occasionally glancing at Jana with eyes full of silent worry. Within 50 yards, the group reached a shallow ravine concealed by dense shrubs. Beneath twisted limbs of creosote, they spotted what remained of a small sedan, flattened, crumpled, half-submerged in loose gravel. Broken glass and singed upholstery suggested the vehicle had caught fire briefly, though it must have burned out on its own. The front end was severely crushed, the windshield spider-webbed with cracks. From the corner of the trunk, letters spelled Herna, enough to confirm it was the Hernandez vehicle. Deputy Wilson uttered a low whistle. Hard crash, likely at night, if they were traveling at speed and swerved. He trailed off, kneeling near the driver's side. Jana's stomach clenched. She approached slowly, her gaze scanning for any sign of human remains. The interior, however, appeared empty, no one pinned in the seats. The relief that coursed through her felt fragile. They still weren't out of the woods. Mark eased closer and pointed to the passenger door. "See these scratches near the handle?" Deep gouges marred the metal. Jana thought of the black bear they suspected roamed this area. Large claw marks, perhaps from an animal investigating the wreck. It stirred a grim possibility. Had Juan or Rosa encountered a bear after crashing? Deputy Wilson radioed for backup, calling in a forensics team. While they waited, Jana circled around, noticing a path leading away from the wreck. Broken branches and scattered pebbles hinted someone had crawled or stumbled in that direction. She exchanged a glance with Mark, and they silently followed the trail. Each step raised dust clouds, the air thick with desert dryness. Within 100 feet, they found fresh footprints in the sand. 2 sets, side by side. Then a set of drag marks, as though someone had been limping or carrying a burden. Jana's pulse hammered. If Juan and Rosa escaped the wreck, maybe they left on foot. But why hadn't they found help sooner? They advanced further until they spotted a small clearing shaded by a solitary palo verde. There, half collapsed against the trunk, lay Juan Hernandez. His arm was wrapped awkwardly around Rosa, who lay against his shoulder. A wave of shock and relief tangled together in Jana's chest. They were alive, but clearly in desperate shape. Their clothes were ripped, faces streaked with dust. Rosa's left leg looked swollen and discolored, possibly broken or infected. Juan's breathing was shallow. Mark rushed forward, dropping to a knee beside them. "Juan, can you hear me?" he asked, voice trembling. Juan's eyelids fluttered. "Water," he rasped. Mark carefully eased his own canteen to Juan's lips. Jana did the same for Rosa, who stirred and blinked, eyes unfocused. "What happened?" Jana asked softly, pressing a palm to Rosa's forehead. She felt warm, maybe feverish. Rosa tried to speak, but managed only a whisper. "Swerved, an animal on the road, car rolled." She coughed, wincing in pain. "Fire. We crawled out. Couldn't call for help. Phone was destroyed." Deputy Wilson, alerted by their shouts, dashed over and radioed for an emergency medical team. The sight of the couple alive, though gravely injured, brought a flurry of relief. Jana pressed a bandage from her first aid kit against a cut on Juan's temple. "You'll be okay. Just hang in there," she murmured. Through labored breaths, Juan managed. "We tried to get help, but some animal, followed us at night. Big, dark shape. It growled." He shuddered, the memory clearly terrifying. "We hid under bushes until morning. Rosa couldn't walk. Then I carried her. We collapsed here." Rosa clutched Jana's hand, tears glistening in her dirt-streaked eyes. "Our animals? The house?" Her voice broke. Jana blinked back tears of her own. "They're safe," she said gently. "We rescued them before the fire destroyed the place. Your Bobcat and kittens, the others, they're at a rehab center, all okay?" That news seemed to steady Rosa. She squeezed Jana's fingers, relief washing over her strained face. Deputy Wilson, speaking into his radio, arranged for a helicopter medevac, given the rough terrain. The minutes that followed felt like a blur of urgent energy. Jana and Mark did what they could to stabilize Rosa's leg and keep both of them hydrated. Wilson directed an incoming search and rescue team to the clearing. At last, the thumping hum of a helicopter drew near, whipping sand into a frenzy. Paramedics descended with a stretcher. Rosa and Juan were carefully secured, IVs inserted, wounds dressed with quick precision. As they were lifted into the chopper, Rosa managed a faint smile at Jana. Juan mouthed something that looked like "thank you." Jana felt her throat tighten. Their survival was nothing short of miraculous, from the crash to the days spent exposed in the desert, menaced by a roaming bear. Back at the wash, Mark and Jana watched the helicopter disappear. They shared a look of overwhelming relief. "They'll make it," Mark murmured. "Amazing they held on this long." Jana exhaled, shoulders sagging as she finally let the tension unravel. At least now the mystery's solved. They crashed on their way out of town, forced off the road by a wandering bear. The fire at their house really was just a tragic coincidence. Deputy Wilson, overhearing, approached with a nod. "We'll confirm details, but it appears the threats from that neighbor had nothing to do with their disappearance. We'll keep investigating the property's damage and the caretaker's role. But the main concern, finding Juan and Rosa, has a happy ending." He smiled, relief evident in his eyes. Driving away, Jana and Mark found the weight in their chests lifting. The Hernandez couple would recover, the sanctuary animals were safe, and the mother Bobcat's miraculous survival now formed just one part of a grander story. How humans and wildlife can intersect in both terrible and remarkable ways. That evening they visited the rehab center one last time. Dr. Davis greeted them with a grin. "Heard the news. They found Juan and Rosa alive." Jana nodded. "They'll need some recovery time, but they're stable." Dr. Davis led them to the quiet ward, where the Bobcat family lounged in a secure enclosure. The kittens had grown visibly stronger, romping with each other while the mother watched. As Jana peered through the window, she imagined telling Rosa and Juan that their beloved Bobcat was thriving, her instincts fierce and protective. The tragedy of losing their home would weigh heavy, but at least they hadn't lost everything. Their own lives, and the lives of the creatures they cared for, had been spared. In the hush of the hallway, Jana and Mark exchanged a contented look. The flames that gutted a house, the footprints in the desert, the swirling fear that something darker was at play, all had led to this precious moment of relief. The Bobcat blinked slowly, as if acknowledging their presence. Even in captivity, her spirit felt wild, unbreakable. Outside, stars began to glitter across the desert sky. The day had been grueling, yet the conclusion was triumphant. Sometimes, Jana reflected, the line between chaos and hope came down to a single decision, a moment of daring or compassion. And in this case, that single decision had saved more lives than she could have ever imagined.